Do you want the most powerful vehicle ever produced? What about a vehicle that will make all of your neighbors jealous? And do you want a vehicle that can do everything without question?
Well, the 2019/2020 Hyundai Tucson is none of these things, but that's what this review is for, so let's begin. Hey everyone, this is Tankenstein coming to you live and direct from middle of nowhere, the center of everywhere, to bring to you today your 2019/2020 Hyundai Tucson review. And the reason why I say 2019/2020 is because between the two model years, the only real difference are the exterior colors. They are slightly changed for 2020, and we also do have a leather-wrapped steering wheel with the 2020 and also a leather-wrapped shifter on sport mode and above for the two leather wrappings. So not really much different between the two models. The powertrain, the drivetrain, the interior, really everything is about the same. The major difference, the major changes that we saw with the Hyundai Tucson came in 2019. So really from here on out until they do kind of a mid-generation refresh, there's not going to be too much different. And even still, it's not going to be all that much different for about another half decade or so. So that being said, I'll be going over quite a bit in this video, including pros and cons. I'll be going over kind of the general features of this vehicle and also give you a final recommendation as to whether or not I feel that you should purchase it. And one thing to note is that I have been driving this vehicle for upwards of around 600 miles now, and I'm scheduled to drive for about another 600 miles. So I'm not just your typical reviewer who's got a car for a day, maybe a week, and drives it for 200 miles max. I've been driving this thing for quite a while, and I've really grown accustomed to the intricacies and kind of the nuances to how this thing drives. So I'm quite familiar with it, and but either way, remember, like, comment, subscribe. But without further ado, let's get into the review. So your instrument cluster on this is very typically Hyundai. Not really too much special about it. It does have a sport mode, and it's just a one-button press, so it is pretty cool. It does, like almost every other sport mode, it stiffens up the steering as well as keeps your RPMs higher for longer. It has a kind of an info center right here in the, I guess you could say, the dash, and it goes over quite a bit. So one cool thing about this feature, or about this vehicle, is that it does have driver assistance. So you have things like lane safety, forward collision warning, you have rear cross traffic. So if you're backing up, it'll tell you if something's coming behind you, I guess you could say, so you can avoid those accidents. And also it has blind spot detection. So if you are, let's say, merging lanes and you don't notice the car next to you, this will send out a warning. So it's actually a pretty cool feature, especially on a relatively low trim level. And much like any other vehicle produced, basically, I believe it was since 2016 or 17, it does also have a rear view camera standard. And that's actually quite a good quality rear view camera, I would say. So before I even get into the infotainment here, I'll just reverse. And let's see if maybe you can see that. So it's pretty high quality. And also, when you turn the wheel, it actually turns, it shows exactly where you will be going. Now, this is a standard feature of most vehicles, don't get me wrong, but it's very smooth in the motion that it does that. Actually, significantly more smooth than my 2017 Hyundai Elantra Sport, which has much bigger increments between, I guess you could say, turning. So that's a cool little feature there. It's a little bit of an improvement, but it kind of shows that Hyundai is definitely improving. Now, for the remainder of the interior, one of the things that you immediately notice is the touchscreen and how it's kind of situated. I know that for me and my Elantra Sport, I really appreciate the inlaid touchscreen in the dash, but in this, it does jut out the top. Being that this is such a tall vehicle, unless you are, fairly short, or vertically challenged, so to speak, you will not notice this really at all. It's pretty cool. My only one issue with it being 6 feet or so, in height, I do sometimes have to reach a little bit longer just to turn the, I guess you could say, the volume knob. And also, if I want to do this, rather than if they were in the dash, they'd be about an inch or so closer. So it's pretty cool. It's a 7-inch display, and it does come with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto standard, and that's across all models. So it's a really cool thing. I know that with this vehicle, having Android Auto has been a savior for me over the 600 miles of me driving it. So really just awesome. And it has your typical, I guess you could say, suite of options when it comes to any sort of Hyundai vehicle. It has Blue Link if you have that standard with the vehicle. It has which Blue Link itself is kind of like OnStar. It has a kind of like a performance meter, or at least that's what I like to call it. This just kind of tells you how fast you're accelerating, decelerating, and where you're kind of keeping your speed. It's pretty cool, especially if you have a sportier vehicle. I would imagine that the Hyundai Veloster N has that, which would be awesome. You can do Bluetooth through this, voice commands, really, again, anything that you might think of. So one of the most utilitarian features on this whole vehicle is the armrest console, and it's pretty bland, and there's not really a ton special about it. But one of the great things that I found with this vehicle is how awesome these heated seats are. They are instant, and it's just really something nice, especially if you're in the grips of winter and you want a heated seat. It just, you feel it almost within just a few seconds, really. You have a pretty powerful fan, I guess you could say, but that's with most vehicles today. But as far as individual climate control and things like that are concerned, on the value, you do not have that, but you do have that on higher end models. Additionally, you do have an electronic parking brake, and you also do have your drive mode selector. So this is for sport and regular mode. And you also have a kind of a downhill slope, I guess you could say, assist, which helps you keep at a certain speed when you're kind of going down a steep grade. So it's pretty useful, especially in bad weather. And again, for a really steep grade, it does help with that. You also have your standard Hyundai steering wheel, where you can control the basics on your, as you can see as I'm going between this. Basically, if you're familiar with any Hyundai, you will be familiar with this, and it's just really well laid out. One additional thing, being that this is all-wheel drive, you can press this, and this locks it onto all-wheel drive. So it's pretty cool. You don't need to have it on all-wheel drive all the time, but it is a nice feature, especially if you're going into winter and maybe you just want that extra assurance. But otherwise, it does typically just drive in front-wheel drive. So insofar as the back of the car is concerned, it is fairly decent sized, albeit a little uncomfortable, not because of the spacing or anything of that nature, but more so just because the seats themselves are fairly stiff. You do have 3 seats back here, so that is very nice, but there are no additional vents back here for rear passenger heating. But you do also have your back of the front seat, I guess you could say, storage compartments, which are nice. And also on each door, you do have the little cup holder things, as well as an armrest with cup holders here. So insofar as the cargo is concerned, it does have around 31 cubic feet of cargo volume, which is about pretty normal when it comes to this class. And it does have, insofar as the value model is concerned, a spare tire in the back, which is fairly useful, being that a lot of vehicles today do not have that. Additionally, you can fold the rear seats down fairly easily, so it goes from 31 cubic feet to 62 or 61.9 cubic feet simply by pulling this lever here, and they slide down pretty much without any effort. So it's a pretty cool system, but albeit, again, pretty standard when it comes to most vehicles of this class. So as far as the exterior is concerned, again, between the 2019 and 2020, you do have a few more exterior colors to choose from. This is the value option, so you do get the 17-inch alloy wheels. I feel that they are fairly attractive, especially considering the value of this vehicle. And this is an aqua blue color as well. So if you go through the front of it, it's pretty, I'd say, a good looking vehicle. Typical Hyundai look, very angular sort of headlights, things of that nature, and it kind of extends through the rest of the vehicle. And the taillights are very similar to the, believe it or not, the Elantra GT. So one thing to note about this vehicle is that the SEL, which is one of the mid-range trims, it does come with the larger 2.4 liter, 181 horsepower 4-cylinder engine. It does also come with dual climate control for the interior, and it does come with larger rims, being that they are 18 as opposed to 17 inches. However, you do not get leather seating until you go all the way up for limited, which costs nearly $30,000. So it's quite a jump that you have to make in order to get leather seats. And insofar as what this car has, it does have cloth, and they're of average quality. I could say that. So I'll get into the pros and cons before I get into my final recommendation. I'll try to make this a little bit brief. So there are quite a few pros to this vehicle, and I'll start off with the acceleration. So acceleration is surprisingly good for a vehicle of this size and really of this lack of power. So it's pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say it's incredible, but going up to 60 is good. Beyond 60, and I'll get into this a little bit later as one of the cons, it's quite poor. And this is the base model 2-liter 161 horsepower engine, but with the 2.4 liter 181 horsepower engine, it should be a little bit better, albeit not all too much, being that it's only a 20% increase, and it will also have a larger engine that will also likely increase the weight of the vehicle, along with all the other features that will be added with the vehicle. So really that extra 20 horsepower is mostly there to compensate for the extra weight. So that being said, I feel that Hyundai would really do a great job of putting in a performance variant for this vehicle, as that is something that is really sorely needed across more or less their entire lineup. And it's just something that they had almost kind of promised in a way with the Hyundai Tucson N, and they were teasing the Tucson N. I feel like this would be a great car to do that with, just because, and I'll get into the other pro in just a moment, but it can use better acceleration, better overall horsepower, and really just a smoother power band, as well as better steering. So that's another great thing about this vehicle. I would say the steering is pretty good, if not kind of great. It's not the best in the world, and that's something that you'll find out a lot with this vehicle. Nothing's really the best, but it's certainly good. It's not going to stand out, it's not going to stand out too much, but it's on the good side of average. Additionally, the cargo space, which is one of the reasons why most people purchase this vehicle, is pretty good. Again, not great, but it's on the positive side of average. You sit at around 31 cubic feet for the just for the trunk, and also 62 or 61.9 with the seats folded down, so it's good. You can fit more or less something that's around 6 feet long from the back of the seat here to the actual trunk door, so that's pretty good. The infotainment is excellent. It's among the best in really the industry, in my opinion. It's better than when I had test drove a Jaguar XF a few years ago, 2016 or 17. This was the supercharged V6 edition, the model, and that was just an awful infotainment system. But on this vehicle, it is certainly excellent. And I would also say the exterior of the vehicle is really just great. It's not something that you're going to look at when you wake up in the morning and throw up. You're not going to wish that you'd purchased another vehicle upon viewing this after you had purchased it maybe about a week later. You're not going to regret it. So it's a good looking vehicle, and again, as with most things, it's on the positive side of average. Although, going back to the infotainment is, in my opinion, top notch. It might be the industry leader. It's that good. Hyundai really hit not only a home run but a grand slam with it, and that's across all their infotainment systems. Because at the end of the day, manufacturers have more or less one infotainment system across all of their vehicles, and this one just so happens to be really great. So let's get into the cons here, and I'd say the biggest con of all really would have to be the fuel efficiency. So it states that this vehicle is getting around 30 miles per gallon. That's what the EPA rating is. I don't see it as being nearly that good. I got around 27 or so miles per gallon on a 600 mile journey up, from the south up to the north, and it just was not all that great. albeit that's only about a 10% difference when it comes to what the computer told me, but it felt significantly worse. This vehicle was laboring almost the entire time just to get up here, and I'll get into that in just a moment as my other con. But beyond 60 miles per gallon, or 60 miles per hour, the fuel efficiency really drops. And below 60, I was getting around 33, 34 miles per gallon. But beyond 60, and especially beyond 65 or even 70, it just dropped precipitously. And there was a point where I'd actually fueled up my the car, and the computer, how it tells you how many miles estimated you have left, the computer told me I had somewhere around 380 miles left, which would have left me with around 80 miles left in my fuel tank. Turns out that I didn't have 80 miles left in my fuel tank by the time I reached my destination. Rather, I had hardly 17. And that was all highway driving with the exception of 1 mile. So I'd used up about an additional 2 to 2.5 gallons of fuel over what my car had estimated. And that is just, to me, unacceptable. That is rough. It's really rough. So in that regard, it's just beyond 65 or 70 miles per gallon or per hour, you're not going to get great fuel efficiency with this. And in fact, you'll probably get pretty subpar fuel efficiency. If your highway speeds are max 60 or 55, sure, this is great for that. But beyond that, man, it suffers. And that leads to my next point. It labors beyond 60 miles per hour. So in order to gain any sort of speed beyond 60, you really have to push this, especially if it's beyond 65 and more so 70. Really, the higher you get in speed, it becomes almost exponentially more difficult. So, sorry, I had a little itch on my nose. So, what I mean by that is there was at one point, and I won't forget this probably for the rest of my life, when I was driving on about a 20% incline, and I was going around 80 miles per hour. So, and I had it on cruise control. I decided to put up 1 mile per hour on the cruise control, and it labored so much. So it went up to 5,000 RPMs almost instantly and stayed there for about 5 or 6 seconds before it finally gained 1 mile per hour. That's it. It's how much effort it took. And there's very few times where I was looking at because there's a little slider between 0 and 50 miles per gallon. And it tells you your real-time fuel estimate, how much you're getting at the second that you're driving. There were very few times where I was even at anything above 25 miles per gallon. That's how rough it was. And it just, even putting the throttle down to 75 when I was, fully in control of the throttle, to 75%, I actually had to look at the speedometer to make sure that I was actually gaining speed. That's how rough it is. It's just not a great engine. And again, compared to even when you do get the larger, more powerful engine, it's only 181 horsepower. It's still a larger engine, so it will weigh a little bit more. And with all the additional features put on this vehicle, with the more enhanced, I guess you could say, versions of it, you're not really going to be getting much of a better power to weight ratio, if any better. You might even be getting a worse power to weight ratio. And that's one of the reasons why I implore Hyundai to really expedite putting a more performance-oriented engine in this vehicle. It would help tremendously with so many of the ailments that this vehicle really has. And it's tough to really recommend this vehicle for anyone that will be driving it for a long period of time, for long distances. But insofar as my recommendation is concerned, I'll give 2 different grades for this vehicle. One for your commuter and one for the people who might, for whatever reason, be mainly driving this on an hour-plus long highway journey. So for your regular commuter, I'd say 45 minutes or less for a commute time. 30 minutes, would be optimal. I have to give this vehicle a solid 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10. And the reason being is because the price point for it is really great. It shares so many of the common features from the base model SE all the way up through the Ultimate. You get Android Auto, Apple CarPlay standard with this, whereas a vehicle like the RDX does not. And that's a luxury-ish vehicle. You have to pay extra for that. So this vehicle, you get so much for it, all the way from the base model, again, all the way up through the Ultimate. And the engine choice is not really poor, up to 60 miles per gallon or 60 miles per hour, but it still could be worked on and really improved. Now, for your average, let's say if you're going to be driving this on long hauls fairly often, and that's your main reason for purchasing this vehicle, because you have to haul things for hours on end, long distances, I got to give this maybe a 5, maybe 4.5 out of 5, or 4.5 out of 10, 5 out of 10. And really the thing that really makes the score higher than it probably otherwise would be is the value. If this was on average across all the trim levels about $1,000 or $1,500 more, I would say maybe a 4 out of 10. It's not great in the long distance just because the fuel efficiency is poor, acceleration, engine performance is not good, and the seats are not the most comfortable in the world up through basically up until you get the leather. It's just not all that good. Lumbar support, no matter where you put it, is pretty subpar, and that's also another one of my cons. Driver, I guess you could say, comfort is not all that great over a long distance. It's just, you can never seem to really find like the perfect spot for your seat. It's just overall, it's mediocre in comparison to my Elantra Sport, which itself is a sport compact, not something that's made to be the most comfortable over the longest periods of time. Over the same drive that I had taken coming up here, but instead going down, I had no issues. In fact, actually, I felt great getting out of my car. It was really comfortable. This is average at best. I'd probably say even a little bit below average. So because of that, I can only really give this about 4.5 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 for your long distance drivers. But again, 7.5 or an 8 out of 10 for people who will be on the highway at maybe 55 or 60 miles per hour and are just commuting regularly with this. It's a great vehicle for that. But beyond that, you're asking a little bit too much. They could use better power in this vehicle, and I think better power would actually end up saving this car. Better fuel, really, it would just save it more fuel because it would have to labor less to actually get it to the speed that you want. Either way, tell me what you guys think. Are you purchasing this vehicle? Did you change your opinion of this vehicle because of my review? And what trim level will you be purchasing or looking at? Remember, like, comment, subscribe, especially subscribe. That all means a ton to me. And either way, this is Tankenstein, and see you guys all on the other side. Thank you so much for watching my video. Have a great day, great night, great whatever you're doing. Take care, everyone.